Hello, good morning, and welcome to the Sunday edition of Proud Malcontent, and this Sunday, the 5th of October. I'm Pete Bell, and I am a proud malcontent. On the promo for today's show, it said that I was going to be talking about how the independence campaign, I was thinking actually about how I have aged, because when it comes to the election next year, I'll have been working on this campaign, what I call the modern age of the independence campaign, for 15 years. It was in 2011 that I gave up my work and decided to focus entirely on the Yes campaign, as it was then. 15 years now. 15 years is a long time. And I was thinking about how I have aged and how I developed, and also how the independence movement itself has aged. And it has to be said, it has not aged well. Possibly no better than myself. But the reason I do these things live instead of doing a recorded podcast is that I try to keep it as topical as possible. So whatever I advertise the programme as being about, it's liable to be preempted by events or overtaken by events. And that's the case today because I opened the national website this morning to be greeted with a rather breathless announcement from the national, characteristically breathless announcement from the Sunday National that there's been a partnership agreement between the SNP and Believe in Scotland, the Gordon McIntyre Kemp vehicle campaign organisation, claims to be the biggest campaign organisation, 140 odd groups, part of Believe in Scotland. It's arguably been the most active campaigning organisation, and I freely admit that they do great work, except it's just not very effective because it's been doing this work for the past 10 years, and as we know, but have to keep on saying, the polls have not moved. So here we have the full partnership agreement between the SNP and Believe in Scotland, and the Sunday National helpfully prints the full memorandum of understanding between the SNP and Believe in Scotland. I'm not going to read it all. It's pretty much just woeful. It's pretty meaningless. I'll just read the first paragraph, the preamble, if you like. The Scottish National Party, SNP, and Believe in Scotland, BIS, in recognising their shared commitment to delivering independence for Scotland, agree to work together to strengthen the case for independence, deepen engagement with the people of Scotland, and create a stronger, broader movement rooted in political leadership and grassroots activism. Which all sounds absolutely wonderful, but what does it all mean? Not very much, to be honest. I mean, they talk about delivering independence, but there is nothing there about delivering independence. It's only about campaigning for independence, or campaigning with the word independence in it. There is absolutely nothing about the actual process of delivering independence. It says nothing about that whatever. And that is what I find sorely disappointing. I did respond. There was one thing I will say for Gordon McIntyre Kemp, and yeah, I have a lot of respect for the guy. He does respond to comments on his when it's an article about Believe in Scotland. He does respond, and in one of his responses, he says, I believe in Scotland, our mission is clear: reset the debate, reunite the movement, rebuild our momentum, great with the slogans, and win independence for Scotland. This agreement is a first step in that process. It demonstrates the SNP's willingness to collaborate more closely with the grassroots, whilst affirming Believe in Scotland's role as a non-party movement. Sorry, a non-party movement-wide umbrella organisation for the independence campaign. This is not about aligning with any one political party, but rather the first step in our plan to reunite the entire Yes movement and get the campaign for Scottish independence back on the front foot again. BIS has already approached Scotland's other independence supporting parties with parliamentarians in their ranks, and after positive initial conversations, we are optimistic about progressing our working relationships with them soon. In addition, we will continue reaching out to non-party Yes organisations to explore opportunities for working together, building a broad, inclusive campaign powered by Scotland's civic voice, blah. I did respond to this, but reading it over again, I noticed something that hadn't struck me before. When Gordon says that BIS has already approached Scotland's other independence supporting parties with parliamentarians in their ranks. That's only ALPA. That's only ALPA. So they've approached ALPA. There's no other nominally pro-independence party with parliamentarians in its ranks. But there's so much of that that's just not, well, some of it's wrong. I'll read my response to that because we have to move on. Because, of course, this being Sunday, we have Confute Corner with Stephen Duncan. He's waiting to join us. So I'll just read my comment to it, and I will be returning to this in the blog at some point when I get time to write up on it. My response to Gordon McIntyre Kemp's comment: oh dear, Gordon, how is it possible for someone to have been around Scotland's independence campaign for as many years as yourself without realising that the SNP does not do collaboration, it does control? What this agreement demonstrates is the SNP's desperate need to replace some of the foot soldiers it has lost as its membership dwindles. Swinney will also be looking to blunt what might have become an irksome thorn in his party's side as it settles in for another 5 years. It is less clear what you hope to gain from this deal between two of the biggest players in the independence industry, given that there is still no mention anywhere of when or how an SNP government proposes to restore Scotland's independence. It's plain to see that there's nothing here that benefits Scotland's cause. On the contrary, what this partnership promises is consolidation of the campaign strategy, in quotes, which has been failing to increase support for independence for more than a decade. I refer, of course, to the most obvious thing the SNP and Believe in Scotland have in common. Both are wedded to the idea of selling independence like a holiday destination while never specifying a departure date or transport arrangements. It's what the independence industry does. It's what the independence industry depends on. that's what I see in this. I see a continuation. I see John Swinney, the SNP, trying to get hooked up with the campaign machine that Believe in Scotland has built up. The campaign machine and the campaign funding that the Believe in Scotland has built up. There's only Believe in Scotland that can afford to do the billboard campaigns and the leafleting campaigns. Only Believe in Scotland has the finance and the person power to do that. And the SNP wants to tap into that because it no longer has either. It has neither the money nor the people to do that kind of mass campaigning, nationwide campaigning. I have always maintained that the constitutional issue is a national issue, and therefore it should be a national campaign, a single national campaign. I would be fine if Gordon McIntyre Kemp was leading that. I would be fine if that campaign centred on Believe in Scotland. If Believe in Scotland was actually proposing a strategy for delivering independence and not a strategy for continuing a failed campaign, a campaign which has failed to increase support for independence, despite the efforts, and I grant that he's made the effort, despite the efforts for over 10 years, totally failed to increase support for independence. Right, I'm going to drop that now. For the time being, there will be more. One more thing. I don't know if you can see this. My comment, my response to Gordon McIntyre Kemp has been downvoted 15 times. It's been upvoted 4 times, downvoted 15 times. Now, that actually doesn't say all that much about my comment. It says a hell of a lot about the state of the independence campaign. Because if you look at the comments, you'll see all these people jumping in and say, oh, hurrah, hurrah, somebody's doing something about independence. And nobody's looking at the detail. Nobody's questioning any of it. You've got John Swinney and Gordon McIntyre Kemp are both saying, oh, this is wonderful. This is going to be great. Yeah, yeah. So and everybody's jumping in and saying, oh, I totally agree. I totally agree. And none of them are actually looking at it closely. They're not scrutinizing it. They're not thinking about it. They're not reflecting on it. Otherwise, they see exactly what I see. So the fact that that's got 15 downvotes tells you all you need to know about the state of the independence campaign. And that harks back to what I was going to be talking about the campaign aging. You might say it's now in its dotage. Anyway, somebody who's not quite in their dotage. Stephen Duncan, let's see, where are you? There's Stephen. Hi, good to see you, Stephen. Hi, welcome.
Right.
Welcome. And I'm going to shut up for a moment and just let you get on with today's presentation. What is it that we're looking at today?
Okay. Well, I'm returning to the theme I started. I think the very first one of these we did a number of weeks ago, back in August. That theme is what I'm calling opinion polls, damned opinion polls, and lies. And it was something I wanted to return to, but it was particularly triggered by one of your blogs this week, the Just Another Fallacy blog that you put out Tuesday or Wednesday of last week. And that referenced a commentator or a commenter that you quoted that said that yes had been 33% at the level of 33% in January of 2012, and currently it's now somewhere in the range of 48% to 50% in a poll of polls. No source was provided for that poll of polls. I'm paraphrasing slightly, but I found it quite misleading, and so that sort of led me on to look at this in terms of the sort of references that people make to today's level of yes support compared to where it was in 2014, and the fact that it's been quoted as being a fact that it's the level of support is a lot higher now than it was in 2014. So I'm going to have a look at that and see
Well,
where we
this,
see what the
this of
reality
course,
is.
this of course connects with what I've just been talking about how this the campaigning that has done, to the extent that there has been any campaigning over the last 10 years, it has been mainly Believe in Scotland that has done it and or been doing it, and the SNP to a certain extent, and various yes groups, but. I think it'd be safe to say all of these efforts have been built on this idea of selling the vision, selling independence like a holiday destination. That has been the core plank of the campaign, and it has. Well, I am claiming it has been markedly unsuccessful because I am claiming, and I have done some number crunching to my limited ability in order to demonstrate this, that support for independence has actually flatlined. So what I'm saying is that campaign has failed. And what the SNP and Believe in Scotland are proposing is simply to continue that style of campaigning, which has failed. It's had 10 years of trial and it has failed. Or has it? Let's see. Let's see what Stephen's verdict is.
Oh, so we're at the conclusion. We'll move back to the beginning. So yeah, so are we in
place to start?
Are we in a better position than in 2014? That's the claim. Is independence support or sentiment as measured in the opinion polls higher than it was 10 or 11 years ago? So one thing, or a few things we should bear in mind before we actually look at this is that different pollsters or different polling firms have different methodologies for extracting or extrapolating their sample data into, population estimates of yes support. Some have they apply different exclusions. Some include 16 and 17-year-olds in their polling sample. Others don't. Some have different weighting factors to reflect the proportion in the population. For example, some of the polling firms adjust their results to reflect the proportions in the population that yes and no represented in the Scottish independence referendum itself 11 years ago. Others don't. And some include, all of them adjust their estimates for an assumption of turnout, and that's based on the likelihood for people to vote. They use different scaling and arbitrary thresholds, so there's lots of variations between polling firms, and that's sometimes something that's not made clear or they're not spelled out. We have to bear that in mind.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Is it a good thing that the numbers are calculated in these different ways, or would it be better if there was a single common methodology?
Personally, I think I think it would be better if it was common, but common on the right characteristics that you're weighting your sample to. So, and this is something I'll maybe look at in a separate podcast. But what I'm meaning is things like that don't change, categories that are not subject to change, like age, sex, country of birth. These are hard and fast. Once you start talking about how did you vote in the referendum, you've got human frailty there. People's memories start to fail. You've also got their foibles where people would maybe guilty no voters not wanting to admit to voting against their
Oh,
own
yeah.
country, or just the sort of general association with a more...
That's a familiar phenomenon. You'll find it very difficult to find anybody who admits to voting for Margaret Thatcher or the Conservatives. Nobody ever voted for her, apparently. So, yeah, I think everybody is familiar with the phenomenon, and so it's people's personal reporting is an unreliable factor.
I believe so. It's it's almost like non-response, or it's worse than non-response. It's misreported response, because what can happen is that if you're overstating the yes 2014 proportion in the current sample, then if you're going to downweight that, you're unfairly penalising, if you like, the yes support, because it's already lower than what it's being reported in the sample.
The biggest problem is that there's no way of measuring by how much or in which direction this variable is being tilted.
Well, you can tell from there's in the polls they report weighted numbers and unweighted or unadjusted, the raw numbers, and you can deduce from that what's going on. And what you will find is that, and I've looked at it for Norstat, panel base, and Survation, and you will find that necessarily the results flip from being a greater proportion of yes no in 2014 to greater proportion of no yes, roughly 45% to 55%, as it must do. It's forced to do so if you're going to weight the sample back to the population, population in terms of the Scottish independence referendum voting pattern. So it forces it to flip it back round from, if it's positive yes no, to positive no yes.
Right. I think what I was trying to get at was, does having all these different methodologies, does that tend to flatten out the outcomes? Do they tend to compensate for one another in terms of error factor or not? I don't know.
Well, as long as you've got, I don't know the full answer to that, but I think as long as you've got, when you're looking at averages of support for something, in this case, yes, if as long as there's an adequate number of different polling firms in the basket of surveys, if you like, then they should they're independent biases, and I say biases in sense of the methodological biases, not institutional bias. They should offset one another to some extent. To what extent, I don't know, but to some extent they'll have they'll mitigate against one another.
Right. Okay, Stephen. That has been rather a protracted interruption. I'm sorry for that, but let's get back to the presentation.
Okay. So, just looking at 2014, a lot of opinion polls in 2014, unsurprisingly, in the run-up to the referendum, 69 of them, between January and the eve of the referendum. We had the referendum itself on 18th of September, as we know. And then in the last 3.5 months of the year, there was 5 further opinion polls. For 2025, for the first 9 months of this year, there's been 12 opinion polls. Just for the record, so 6 of these have favoured yes, 5 have favoured no, and 1 was a tie. I already saw a comment today saying that all the opinion polls, just today, about an hour ago, all the opinion polls of the last 3 years have been supportive of yes. It's not even true for this year. That's a side issue. The polling average, we're going to look at the yes polling average, as we discussed before, and that's going to be taken into account the basket of survey results, which should give you a sort of general impression of the level of support, because these biases should maybe compensate to some extent. We'll also look at selected pollster survey results and compare them on a like-for-like basis. That should give you an impression of what the trend has been.
There's one point here you're talking about this misrepresentation of the support for yes, or misleading accounts of the support for yes, such as what you were saying. Somebody claiming that every opinion poll for the past 3 years. I've seen that myself, and that claim is not true. The point about this is that it's misrepresenting our starting point. So if you're planning a campaign, you like a journey, you have to know where you're starting from. Presumably, you'll know your destination, you'll know what you're campaigning for, but you also have to know your starting point so that you can plan that journey. I know we've talked about this before. I just thought it was worth throwing in again, this business of knowing where we're starting from. And I get the impression, a very strong impression. In fact, I think it's undeniable that the larger part of the independence movement is totally misled. I'm trying to avoid the word deluded here, but they totally fail to comprehend where we are. So it's not unexpected, therefore, that they're mistaken about how we proceed from here. They think there are ways of proceeding, which in actual fact there aren't, because we're not starting from where they think we are. I don't know if I've expressed that very well. Again, apologies for interrupting. I just think this is a point constantly worth making. We must be clear about where we're starting from.
Yeah, you can't measure progress if you don't know where you're starting from. The other thing is that it does breed complacency as well. If you say, oh, well, the last 3 years we've got independence at 52, 53, 54%, whatever number it is you want to assert, and it's almost implying that it's in the bag when really it's quite far from that. Okay, so let's take a look at some numbers now. This is the evolution of yes sentiment through 2014 and comparing to where we are at 2015. So just talk through that chart a little bit. The dotted red line is the 44.7% that was achieved in the independence referendum. The blue line looks at the quarterly average of yes support from the last quarter of 2013 up to the referendum. So you can see that it starts at just under 40% at the end of 2013, rising to 42% end of Q1 in 2014. Then by the middle of the year, it's almost 44%, and peaks at 46.6%, just under 47% in the period July to just before the referendum. And then falls back to the actual result itself, and it's clearly it's higher in the 12 opinion polls that we've had in the 9 months of this year. It's just over 50%. So the claim that it's higher than 2014, yes support that is currently, is true when you look at it in terms of the first 8.5 months of 2014, where the average was 44.6%, almost the same as what actually turned out to be in the referendum. And it looks like it's increased by 5 percentage points roughly since that time. So, but
is it worth stating or clarifying at this point that there's a margin of error with all these polls? So that if the claim is that it's been 53, has been at 53%, and something else says it's at 50%, both can actually be true, because that's within the margin of error. And my for for the last 14 years, sorry, for the last 11 years, since 2014, the real figure has been within margin of error of the figure that you were talking about, 47%. Is within margin of error of that. Am I correct?
Yes, it's. I mean, I was thinking. I've just said for the last couple of years it's been 50%, give or take. I mean, generally generally these opinion polls, in general, they're as a margin of error of plus or minus 3%. That means that given the size of the sample, if it's around about 1,000 in the sample, you are 95% certain that the actual population level of support for yes is plus or minus 3% of whatever you come up with in your sample estimate for yes.
Right. Aye. Okay. That's clarified. Yeah. Right.
So this chart is the same as the one we looked at previously, but with the insertion of the 5 opinion polls that were carried out between 19th of September and the end of the year in 2014. And that gives a slightly different impression as to where we are vis-a-vis 2014 in quote marks. In the last quarter, you can see that the momentum of the referendum, or perhaps some guilty no voters feeling a bit of remorse for voting the way they did, and maybe also people's back being got up because of the speech that David Cameron made on the morning after the referendum, that the opinion polls carried on rising up till over 50% by the end of the year. So compared to that, it's more or less flat since then. I mean, the 12 opinion polls this year, it's more or less the same level, slightly below, but as you say, margin of error means 0.3% is nothing. It's flat. It's certainly not higher than the last quarter of 2014. There's a little table on the bottom left there. So that's looking at all the opinion polls that have been were carried out in these particular dates. On the bottom left table there, I've got the results of the polls that were carried out by pollsters that were active in both periods only. So we're looking at 5 opinion polls carried out in the last quarter of 2014. They were done by Norstat, Panelbase, YouGov, and Survation. And of the 12 opinion polls that were carried out in 2025, 8 of them were carried out by these same 3 firms this year. So overall, well, looking at them one by one, Panelbase showing a bit of an increase, 1.5% between the 2 periods. YouGov is showing a sizable decrease, 6 points reduction, and Survation is more or less the same. Overall, about just over 1% lower this year compared to the final quarter of 2014. So when you look at it on a like-for-like basis, we're a bit, yes is a bit lower. It's more significantly lower than it is when you look at it at the overall average level. And the reason for that is that there are of the other 4 opinion polls that were carried out this year, 8 plus 4 equals 12 opinion polls. They were carried out by 3 of them were carried out by Find Out Now, which is a pollster that's a member of the British Polling Council, but has only been polling since 2021. But in all the 13 surveys that they've carried out since then, they've averaged 53%, and none of them have been below 50%. And Ipsos carried out the other opinion poll, and they've had 14 surveys since 2019. All of them have been positive for yes, and 2025 it was 52%. So they are serving to bolster that number from 49.08% for the 8 polls carried out by Norstat, YouGov, and Survation, up to adds up to 50%, just over, when you include these other 4 polls.
But
So
you've no way, presumably, of knowing, is that a distortion? Are these, they can't all be outliers. Which is which is the correct? I use that term advisedly. Which is the correct term here? Comparing like with like in terms of pollsters, or just comparing the numbers against one another, which is likely to be more true?
Well, I prefer I prefer, if you're looking for trends, for for changes, you should always compare like with like. If you're looking for changes, when you want to find the level of support really depends on the method, the methodology that's been employed. The stuff I went through earlier on about the exclusions, about the weighting factors, about the turnout filter that's applied. So they can, that has an impact on the level of support. We'll never know for sure who's actually right until we actually carried out a proper canvassing of the population in a true referendum or an election, if that's what you're looking at, election voting intentions. So I would, for trends, I would look at like for like polling firms. Never compare. People talk about, you see it in the National all the time. Yes is soaring. Well, it would be soaring because a lot of the time people are comparing an eagle with a sparrow. So yes, it's going to, it's going to look, one poll is going to look making a large, change one time period to the next, because you're comparing apples with pears. It's a different comparison. If you want to get an overall sense of the level of the underlying level, it's probably best to take an average, unless you know for sure that one pollster is getting it right and another pollsters aren't. But we don't know. There is this argument about this recollection characteristics that I was talking about. Yeah, how do people vote in a prior election, or particularly how did they vote in a referendum 11 years ago? How did they vote in the EU referendum 9 years ago? That is probably, I think it's probably a distortion, that particular way of doing things that way. Now, Norstat do that, and so does Survation. Find out now don't, and now they do Ipsos. So, and this is something I want to look at for another program, is to see just how much, compare just how much the impact is on Norstat and Survation versus Find Out Now and Ipsos, who don't do that. And you can, it might give a handle on what the different impacts are, but then it's a case of which one's right. We still don't know for sure. Yeah. My tendency would be to say, don't do that. Don't make that adjustment. The other, adjusting to population characteristics are fine. Attributes are fine, as long as these attributes are objective classes, objective categories.
I get what you're saying there. I think the point perhaps I'm trying to make here is that people insist that numbers don't lie. Well, neither do words. Words have to be selected and arranged in a certain way in order to become a lie or a deception. And it works exactly the same for numbers. There are perhaps fewer ways of arranging numbers to be deceptive. I don't know. But numbers can lie, or they can deceive. So when you see somebody saying the numbers for yes are soaring, then always take a close look at what they're comparing, because it can be deceptive.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so we'll move on to the conclusion. I'm just going to come around to these points you were making. So, is support for Scottish independence higher than 2014? I would say that's a half truth. Depends what your benchmark is. So clearly, up until the first 9 months of the year, and up to including the referendum, support is higher. Would appear from all the opinion polls than it was at that time. But it's not higher than compared to the last quarter of 2014. So the comparison of snapshots can provide different interpretation depending on A, what the benchmark is that you're referencing, and B, the composition of the basket of surveys that are included in the assessment, as we've previously discussed. So this, that can be used, to distort, deceive, and slant the facts. And numbers can be used just like words. And the consequences of the manipulation and publishing of partial information is that it brings the sample survey statistics for estimation of population parameters into disrepute, makes my job harder. It gives a false sense of reality, this complacency that I was talking about, or it can do. A common refrain from people is I don't believe the polls, when really what it should be more accurately, I don't believe that particular reading of the polls. I would just say that I think in common with what you were implying just a couple of minutes ago, Peter, to people when they're looking at reports of opinion polls is, always check what the commenter or commentator's agenda is, if there is an agenda. Are they trying to, justify a spurious argument with selective facts and figures? And are they using them, are they referencing, credible sources? I would just say, look out for that. Don't take things at face value. Just dig in around about it. That's how I found out about some of these things. And just be vigilant.
Yeah, exactly what you're saying. A couple of things come to mind. One thing that does irk me, I'm quite easily irked, one thing that does irk me is people who insist that the polls are rigged, purposefully rigged to give a certain result. That really annoys me, because you ask for evidence of this rigging, and we're talking reputable polls now, members of the British Polling Council. The methodology is published, the raw data is published. So, if they're rigged, then the evidence should be there. So show us the evidence. Can we state categorically that the polls are not rigged? Another factor, of course, in this is that these firms make their money from being right about things. They have to be reliable. They have to be trusted, because they're making their money doing polling for businesses. And if they're found to have been rigging the polls, then it's going to cost them business. It's probably going to cost them all of their business. So, yeah, can we state categorically that the polls are not rigged?
Got a question from me? Yeah.
Aye.
Well, yeah. I mean, yes, we can, until somebody shows evidence that they are. The person making the claim that they are has, the onus is on them to provide that proof, rather than just, make a, unsubstantiated, comment, conspiratorial comment. As you say, all these firms, all the ones we quoted here, are all members of the British Polling Council. You can look them up. There's I don't know how many there are. There's quite a lot of them. They're all there. But you do see these comments. A favorite one, a favorite annoying one of mine is when YouGov, who are when they produce a poll, YouGov are generally show yes sentiment at a lower level than other pollsters, in the same ways that Find Out Now generally shows at a higher level, right? But when they do, and say the opinion poll goes from 47% yes to 46% yes, and the last one to the current one, you'll see it in the national, all the comments, well, it's the British own that one. It's run by a member of the Conservative Party, founded by a Conservative Party member, the former minister Zawahiri, can't remember his first name, but he founded it. That's true, but that doesn't make it. He's not running it, and even if he did, as you pointed out, they've got a business to run. As soon as they start distorting the numbers or rigging it, then they would lose credibility and the business would close overnight.
Yeah.
But at the same time, these same people, if the opinion poll went the other way from YouGov from 47% to 49%, there will be, great claims of, here we go, independence just around the corner, things are going great. I've seen it, and it's very annoying, and there's no reasoning for it, no rationale. So the evidence, I see no evidence of any rigging from polling companies. If there is, that'll change my mind, but somebody has to provide it.
Yeah. So the answer to anybody who claims that the polls are rigged is a two-word answer. No, the other two-word answer. Prove it. Or you can go with the first word, two-word answer if you like. You probably find this familiar as well. If you do that, if you go with either one of the possible two-word answers, the response that you tend to get is, "Oh, so you believe that there's no, and you believe all the polls, you believe everything that you." No, I don't believe the polls. I take them as an indicator. I take them. I don't look at a single poll and say, "Oh, look, that is prophesying what the result will be." No, polls are useful for tracking trends, but none of them are predictions.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
It's just a snapshot at a point in time. So if you're asking somebody how do you intend to vote this time 6 months away, that's only today's indicator. It doesn't mean to say that they're actually going to do that. You have to keep asking the question up to the eve of the actual formal poll.
One further thing while you're here, Stephen. As you know, I've had my own very simple, very rough and ready way of indicating the comparative level of support for yes between 2014 and now, whenever now is. And all I do, and it is simplistic as well as simple, but I think it's perfectly valid. And but I get a lot of stick for doing this. But what I do is I take a certain number of polls after the referendum, say 10, and average them. And then I take the same number of the most recent polls and average them and compare those two numbers. And every time I've done that, over many years, every time I've done that, the level has been within that plus or minus 3 points. So the question for you as a professional statistician retired, is that a valid comparison? Is it a simple calculation that people can do for themselves without knowing anything about statistics?
Yeah, they can do, and I think the only one thing to bear in mind is that like-for-like comparison. Just to go reference that like-for-like comparison on the presentation I made, is that as long as you don't have in any one of the two any one of the two baskets of surveys that you're comparing, as long as it's not dominated, one's dominated by one or two pollsters and the other one isn't, as long as it's roughly the same pollsters that are in there in both, like I was doing with Q4 2014 versus first 9 months of this year, even though one of them has 8 polls and one of them's got 5 polls, it's not the number of polls, it's what the companies are in them. As long as they're like for like companies, that's probably your best way of doing it.
Well, I generally overcome that to at least some extent by including a larger number of polls. If you include, for example, I think the highest number I've used was 24. And if you're including 24 polls at both ends, then you've pretty much averaged them out, and you've pretty much compensated for any outliers or any pollster peculiarities in that. But it is a perfectly valid way. It is a perfectly valid way of doing it. It's a calculation that people can do for themselves. If they doubt that that support for yes has flatlined over the past 14 years, then over the past 11 years since 2014. If they doubt that, they can do that calculation for themselves, and they can do it as often as they like, with as many polls as they like, so long as they're taking the same number at both ends. Is that correct?
Well, in all likelihood, you're right. Because you're taking, I don't know, 20 to 10 polls in each. You're probably going to get a spread of pollsters in that period. It's not all going to be one or two pollsters. Unlikely. In a narrower period, it can be for whatever reason. But if you've got a big enough number of polls, the chances are you're going to have the same pollsters represented in both. Maybe roughly the same, but it's something to look at. Is make sure that you're not dominating with a whole bunch of Ipsos polls in one and a whole bunch of YouGov polls in the other. And as long as you're not doing that, it's probably fair to do that or calendarize them. I do that myself. What's the average, for that particular year? All the polls, irrespective of what's in there, I just add them all up and just say this is the general pattern that we're seeing. So I think it's reasonable to do that, as long as I say, make sure it's at any time. If you're looking at a different time period, make sure that you're not just picking up.
Also, perhaps worth mentioning that this is another thing that you'll be familiar with. I always use as a source for the numbers. I always use the Wikipedia list of polls that goes back to well before the 2014 referendum. And I use that because you'll be familiar with people who say, "Oh, Wikipedia, anybody can edit that. Anybody can say anything on Wikipedia." So, go ahead then. Show me how you can do that. No, the Wikipedia list is very reliable because they only list polls that ask a standard question, and they only list pollsters who are registered with the British Polling Council, and they give sources for all the data. Down at the bottom, there's all the footnotes with all the sources for the data. So Wikipedia is a reliable source for information. Can we state that categorically?
Yes, I use that. I agree with that. And also, if you can look at it, and you can, because there are links there, you can go into the individual pollsters and verify that what's stated in that table or these tables that they provide are a reflection, a true reflection of what's in the individual polling firm's website. I do that all the time myself, and in fact, I do edit these tables and add to them when a new poll gets published if somebody else hasn't done it. And if they have done it, I check that it's actually a reflection of the data tables that are on the website that of the polling firm that's just put out a new survey result. Sometimes it's not. I'll delete it if that's the case. And sometimes, I'm not sure I'm not the only person that does that, but I do check that. And as far as I'm concerned, it's totally reliable, and I would use that as your source and quote it as your source. I've also had that comment made as well, that the Wikipedia is, or anybody can add to that. Anybody can add to that, but I would say it's reliable, and I would use it. Yeah.
No, the point about Wikipedia is that it is being constantly edited every second of every day. There are thousands, tens of thousands of people are monitoring it. You can put falsehoods in there, but they're not going to stay there very long. And people have no problem with quoting textbooks or reference books like Encyclopedia Britannica. There are constant deletions and corrections to like Encyclopedia Britannica, but there's only a new one published about every 10 years, I think, whereas Wikipedia's updated all the time. This wasn't supposed to be an advert for Wikipedia. I'm just saying it is as reliable a source as any, and a far more accessible source than most.
Well, that's the point. Everything's in one place rather than having to go to the different polling firms. If you just want to get a feeling of what's going on, you can go there. If you want to get more detail, you'd have to go to the individual polling websites in the first place. But it's all in the one place.
And we're running out of time, Stephen. So I just want to make this one final point with you, that the reason we're talking about this, and the reason we're talking about easy ways of checking information and making sure that you've got reliable information, is that what we're saying is people should question the representation of polling figures that they are given in the newspapers or in blogs or people's comments. When people are presenting the polling results, that shall we say, mistakes are made, or there's a slant one way or the other. So people should be asking the questions. They should check for themselves, and they need a simple way of doing it, because not every, well, I would suspect most people are no better at number crunching than myself, and I am not good at all. So that was my reason for trying to devise a very simple method that anybody could do, so that you're not just saying question what you're being told. You're giving people a way of checking it.
Yeah.
Right. Okay then. As I say, we're running out of time, but that's been interesting again, Stephen, and we'll see you next Sunday.
Okay. All right, Peter.
Oh, bye just now, Stephen. And yeah, we are running out of time. That hour seems to have gone by very rapidly today, and there's been a lot to think about in that. And not least my opening rant about the SNP Believe in Scotland agreement, and there's a lot in there that's going to that merits discussion, merits debate, and I see that the down thumbs on my response to Gordon McIntyre Kemp, the count is now gone up to 21, and I, as I said before, I'm quite pleased with that. I mean, because it proves a point. As far as I'm concerned, it proves a point. People are just accepting what they're being told. They're accepting it at face value, and they really shouldn't. You should question everything. You look at this agreement and ask awkward questions. Ask yourself, what does this do to benefit Scotland's cause? What advantage does it give? How does it take us forward? How does it progress Scotland's cause? And I'm saying that in most instances, you will find that it doesn't, because that is not the priority. If it was the priority, they would include details on the when and how. Okay, time's up. Time's up. I'll be back with you on Wednesday, when we have to look forward to another song from Frankie Mary. Bye for now.